Friends, welcome to the amazing yet confusing world of DC. If you've only watched DC movies and cartoons so far, and you want to get into the comics, you've probably asked yourself the question, where should I start? I know, dozens of reboots, several parallel universes, and hundreds of comic book volumes can seem like a nightmare. But don't worry. Today, I'm here to show you the simplest and best paths to enter the world of DC Comics in 2025. I'm going to fully and simply explain the entire world of DC Comics, all the reboots, universes, and other things in this video, so you understand that if you follow these tips, you can start reading right away. Let's go see how we can enter the vast world of DC Comics without getting confused. What is a comic book? First of all, let's see what a comic book actually is. A comic book is a form of sequential art, meaning it tells a story through successive images placed in panels. The early roots of comics go back to the 19th century newspapers and cartoon strips, but the comic book in its modern form was born in the 1930s with the emergence of superheroes. The arrival of Superman in 1938, followed by Batman, created what we call the golden age of comic books. Comics evolved from simple children's entertainment into a powerful medium for adult, mythological, and philosophical storytelling. In reality, comics are the modern myths of our world. Now that we know what a comic is, we need to learn the language of this world too. These are the terms that will help you understand the structure of the stories. Issue. Every issue is a single, usually 20-something page volume of a weekly or monthly published comic. Example, Action Comics 1050 or Batman #1. Annual. A thicker comic that is usually published once a year. These issues often contain extra stories or introductions to a larger storyline. Example, Justice League Annual #1. One-shot. A completely self-contained comic that is only published in one issue, and the story starts and finishes in that single volume. Example, The Killing Joke, which is often recognized as a one-shot. Story arc. A complete story that is told over several consecutive issues of a series. Example, The Hush storyline, which was published across several issues of Batman, is a story arc. Series. The main, ongoing title of a character or team. It's like a TV show that is currently airing. Example, the main title Superman or The Flash.
Run refers to all the issues where a specific writer or creative team was responsible for writing or drawing them. Example, Scott Snyder's run on the Batman comics from 2011 to 2016. Volume. When a comic series finishes its numbering and starts again from #1, it has technically gone into a new volume. This is done to make it easier for new readers to start. Example, The Flash Volume 5, meaning the 5th time the Flash series has started from issue 1. Omnibus, a very large, heavy book that usually collects the entire run of a writer on a series or all issues of a major event. These are great for collectors. Example, DC Rebirth Omnibus. Event, a major crossover storyline that involves all or a large part of the DC universe and usually changes the DC world. Example, Crisis on Infinite Earths or Dark Knight's Death Nettle. Reboot, the complete rewrite of a comic universe's history and storylines. This is done to simplify the continuity and attract new readers. Example, The New 52, the major reboot of 2011. Era, a defined period in comic publishing history characterized by a specific tone, characterization, and art style. Example, Golden Age or Rebirth Era. Now that you're ready to enter the DC world, you need to know how the company's comics are classified. Generally, DC Comics are divided into 3 main categories, and understanding these 3 categories will make your job incredibly easy. 1. Main continuity, the core of the DC universe. This category includes all stories that happen in the official and formal DC universe, known as Prime Earth or Earth Zero. These stories are interconnected. For example, what happens to Batman affects Superman. This is where main titles like Action Comics, Detective Comics, and Justice League are placed. If you want to follow the day-to-day events and evolution of the heroes, you should follow this category. This section itself is divided into different eras like Rebirth or New 52, which we will explain later. 2. Out of continuity, the alternative world. This category includes stories that are not related to the main storyline and are completely independent. This is where writers can do whatever they want to the characters without worrying about the impact on the main DC universe. Elseworlds, famous out-of-continuity stories like Superman Red Son. DC Black Label. This is DC's newer specialized section for dark, violent, and high-level stories for adult readers like Joker or The Dark Knight Returns. These are the best place to start without needing any background knowledge. 3. Formats and target audience. This category relates to the publication format or the comic's target audience. For example, digital-first comics that are first published digitally, or young adult comics that are written for teenagers and have a lighter tone. These are usually shorter stories or new retellings of hero origins.
Well, friends, if you want to enter the DC world without the hassle of reboots and complex histories, this section is for you. The out-of-continuity world, or the alternative world, is a beginner reader's best friend. These stories have nothing to do with Batman's or Superman's main storyline, meaning the writer can do whatever they want to the characters and kill them off or age them at the end of the story without causing problems for the main DC universe. In reality, these are parallel Earths and the creative spaces of the writers. This category has two very important subcategories. 1. Elseworlds, other worlds. Elseworlds means what if. These stories change the setting and conditions. For example, Superman Red Son, which asks the question, what would happen if Superman landed in the Soviet Union? These stories are completely self-sufficient. 2. DC Black Label. Black Label is DC's newest and most prestigious brand for out-of-continuity stories. These stories are usually darker, with adult themes, and very high artistic quality. This is the guaranteed stamp for quality and maturity of content. The Dark Knight Returns falls under this banner today. For real beginners, low barrier to entry, these stories are the absolute best starting point because they require no prior reading. You can pick up a volume and the story starts and finishes right there. By buying one book, you get the entire story and you don't need to hunt for the next issues. For fans of a specific genre, if you love noir, horror, or science fiction stories, you can read a Batman story in that specific genre, like Gotham by Gaslight, which puts Batman in the Victorian era. These stories are completely self-sufficient. For testing your taste, you can read Elseworlds or Black Label to see if you connect with the tone and depth of DC stories at all. These are the best way to test the waters before diving into the main storyline. For serious readers, many of the best and most important comics in DC history, like The Killing Joke, are actually independent stories or one-shots that are out of continuity, but their impact has been global. In short, if you want to start with Black Label. Now we get to the third category, which is less about the story and more about the type of publication and the target audience of the comic. This section is vital for you who want to pick up a comic without hassle and read it. 1. Collected editions, trade paperback, TPB, and graphic novel. This is the most important thing you need to learn. You shouldn't buy all the single issues. The best way to read comics is to buy a trade paperback or a graphic novel. A TPB usually collects 5 to 7 issues of a story arc and publishes it in a thicker book format. Advantage, you have an entire complete story in one volume. All the comics we named before, like The Long Halloween or The Killing Joke, are usually published in this format. This is the easiest way to start an adventure without needing to follow weekly issues. 2. Digital-first comics.
These comics are usually published first online for digital platforms and then later come out in print. Advantage, they often have a lower price and a fast release pace. Audience, these are great for those who want to read something quick and new in between major storylines or who are looking for side stories based on TV series like Smallville or Arrow. 3. Young adult and middle grade comics. This is one of DC's newest and most important categories, created for the teen audience or those looking for modern retellings. These comics usually retell the hero origins like Wonder Woman, Harley Quinn, or Batman, with a focus on contemporary issues for youth, like school, identity, and social pressure. The tone is often lighter and cheerier than the dark Black Label stories, and they have very vibrant and modern art. If you are young or want to read origin stories with a completely modern and updated perspective, you should definitely try this section. Big writers like Marie Lu and Cami Garcia work in this section. These are a great and non-violent way to introduce your children to the world of comics.
Well, if you want to understand the entire history of the DC Universe, from the very beginning until now, you must become familiar with the concept of eras. The main continuity, which we call Earth Zero or Prime Earth, has been changed many times to keep the stories updated. This history of DC, from 1939 until today, is divided into 7 main eras, each with its own style and tone. 1. Golden Age, 1938 to early 1950s. This was the birthplace of superheroes. With the introduction of Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, comics were formed. The tone of the stories was often simple, patriotic, and two-dimensional. This age established the standards. 2. Silver Age, 1956 to 1970. After a short break, comics returned strongly. The focus was on science fiction stories and cosmic concepts. Characters like the Flash and Green Lantern were rebooted, and for the first time, the concept of the multiverse was introduced. 3. Bronze Age, 1970 to 1985. The tone of the stories matured. Writers addressed social issues like drugs, racism, and heroes became deeper and more vulnerable. Batman stories became darker, and this age was the prelude to a big change. 4. Modern Post-Crisis Age, 1986 to 2011. This era began with the massive event Crisis on Infinite Earths, which destroyed all parallel universes and merged them into a single timeline. The goal was to simplify the stories. This period includes some of the darkest and best stories, like The Dark Knight Returns. 5. The New 52, 2011 to 2016. This was the second and hardest reboot. The entire history of the heroes was erased, and they were introduced as completely modern and 5 years younger. This was a great and clean starting point for beginners, but it removed the previous continuity. 6. DC Rebirth, 2016 to 2023. This was a soft reboot. DC admitted its mistake in erasing history and focused again on hope and restoring the heroes' emotional relationships. This age reconciled classic roots with modern stories. 7. Dawn of DC, 2023 onwards. This is the latest phase continuing rebirth that shows the current status of the heroes and focuses on the future in exciting new stories. In summary, these eras act like train stations for you. To start, just choose one of the reboots, New 52 or Rebirth, and hop on the story train from there. All right, friends, let's go over these eras and sections one by one and explain them. The Golden Age, the birth of the hero. Now, let's dive deeper into the heart of history. If you want to know how superheroes were born, you need to go to the Golden Age, which started in 1938 with an explosion of new stories and continued until the early 1950s. The Golden Age began with the introduction of Superman in Action Comics #1. Superman was not just a character, but a revolutionary idea that suddenly created the superhero genre. During a tough economic time, the Great Depression, and then the threat of World War, people needed heroes with absolute hope.
After Superman, DC quickly introduced Batman. Batman here was still a dark and violent detective, but not as much as the modern versions. It was during this period that Wonder Woman, as a symbol of equality and female power, made her debut. Golden Age stories often had a simple and direct tone. Villains were usually gangsters, mad scientists, or wartime spies. During World War II, comics played a big role in raising national morale and fighting Nazism. Heroes like Captain America and Marvel, and many DC heroes directly fought foreign enemies. Good was absolutely good, and bad was absolutely bad. There was no sign of the psychological complexities we see today. This era introduced us to the first versions of many characters, such as Jay Garrick, the first Flash, and Alan Scott, the first Green Lantern. Later, in the Silver Age, DC created new sci-fi versions of these characters and explained that the Golden Age heroes lived on a parallel Earth, Earth 2, which ultimately led DC to create the concept of the multiverse. If you are looking for the clean, untouched roots of the superheroes, you should check out Golden Age comics. But be ready to see stories with older structures and simpler art. This age is the foundation and backbone of what we know today as DC.
The Silver Age, the sci-fi renaissance. Now we arrive at the Silver Age, which started in 1956 and continued into the late 60s. This era was truly a renaissance for comics, because after a sales slump in the early 50s, DC changed the game with a new strategy. The major difference between the Silver Age and the Golden Age was the focus on science and imagination. In this period, heroes no longer got their powers from magic or random accidents. Rather, they mostly originated from chemical experiments, space technology, and strange rays. The most important moment was the relaunch and introduction of The Flash in 1956, but this time, instead of Jay Garrick, we met Barry Allen, a forensic scientist who got his powers from a laboratory accident. Following him, Hal Jordan, the space pilot Green Lantern, was introduced, who got his power from a cosmic ring. One of the biggest legacies of the Silver Age was formalizing the concept of the multiverse. When the Silver Age Flash, Barry Allen, met the Golden Age Flash, Jay Garrick, DC explained that the old heroes lived on Earth 2 and the new heroes lived on Earth 1. This concept raised DC's complexity level in a fascinating way and defined the structure of the DC world for decades. It was in this era that the Justice League of America was formed, the gathering of the main heroes to confront cosmic threats. The stories were often bright, full of cheerful colors, and focused on solving strange scientific mysteries, not just street gangsters. If you are looking for pure, colorful, and cool fictional stories full of space experiments and advanced technology, the Silver Age will be an exciting trip to the past. This era is essentially the godfather of modern sci-fi comics. The Bronze Age, the shift to reality. Now we leave the cheerful, sci-fi world of the Silver Age and entered the Bronze Age, a period that started roughly in the early 1970s and continued until the massive Crisis on Infinite Earths event in 1985. The Bronze Age was a major turning point. Writers gradually moved away from space and strange rays and started addressing real and social issues in America. American society was dealing with the Vietnam War, civil rights movements, and environmental issues, and these directly entered comic storylines. Heroes in this period were no longer the ideal people of the Silver Age. They had flaws or character weaknesses, they experienced doubts, and they faced tough moral choices. In short, the characters became more human. One of the most famous stories of this period was the Green Lantern Green Arrow comic, which directly addressed the issue of drug use. This was a big risk that showed comics could be more than mere entertainment. The genre of horror and the supernatural also peaked. Characters like Swamp Thing and Ghost Rider in Marvel became popular and showed that the audience was looking for deeper and darker stories. Impactful and lasting deaths in both DC and Marvel began, showing that the hero's actions had real consequences.
While the tone of the stories was maturing, the continuity also became extremely complex. With several parallel Earths and hundreds of stories piled up over decades, following the narrative became almost impossible for new readers. For this reason, the Bronze Age eventually reached an explosion point, where DC decided to reset its entire universe to save the genre. This era was in reality the bridge that connected the cheerful comics of the past to the dark and mature tone of the modern age.
The modern age. Now we arrive at the period that defined Batman forever, the modern age, which started in 1986 and continued until the big New 52 reboot in 2011. This era began with a massive explosion. In 1985, DC released the huge event Crisis on Infinite Earths. This was not a simple story, but a massive cleanup. Writers destroyed all the confusing parallel universes, multiverse, and merged them into a single, simplified timeline. The goal was to make it easier for new readers to enter the DC world. With this new beginning, the tone of comics completely changed. This era saw the emergence of works that forever changed the superhero genre. Frank Miller with The Dark Knight Returns and Alan Moore with Watchmen showed that comics could be a medium for serious, dark, and completely adult stories. Batman in this period became a darker, more violent, and more psychological character. The Batman Year One storyline seriously redefined his origins. Even Superman, the symbol of hope, was relaunched in this era. John Byrne in Man of Steel changed Superman's origins to make him more human and relatable. George Perez also modernly recreated the myths of Wonder Woman. In short, the modern age was the era of deepening characterization, political and social issues, and moral ambiguity. Heroes could no longer fix everything with a smile. This era brought comics to the artistic status they have today and founded all the stories of Batman, Superman, and the Justice League that you see in movies today. The New 52, the hard reboot. Now we leave the modern age and arrive at one of the biggest and most controversial decisions in DC's history, the New 52. This period started in 2011 with the goal of saving the company and attracting new readers. After decades of storytelling and accumulation of continuity that was like an insurmountable mountain for any beginner, DC decided to perform a hard reboot. The New 52 wiped out DC's entire history and announced that the heroes had only been active for about 5 years. DC canceled all its ongoing titles and published 52 new series with issue number 1. This action was practically a golden entry gate for anyone who wanted to start from scratch. The goal of the New 52 was to show the heroes as younger and more modern. Costumes were updated, and the tone of the stories generally became darker and grittier than even the modern age. This reboot worked great for some characters. For example, Batman reached one of the best storylines in his history during this period by Scott Snyder and Greg Capullo, and saw the introduction of the Court of Owls. But some changes, especially in characters like Superman and Starfire, faced a lot of criticism. Old fans felt that the soul of some characters was lost. For you as a beginner, the New 52 is a double-edged sword. But ultimately, the New 52 is an important historical period and was the best way to start without any prerequisites in DC history. DC Rebirth, the soft reboot. After the New 52 period, in which many old readers felt the soul of the characters was gone, DC made its biggest corrective move in 2016, DC Rebirth. This period was not a reboot, but a restoration. The goal of Rebirth was to bring back all the hope, optimism, and key relationships that had been removed in New 52. Instead of erasing history, DC revealed that a mysterious force, which was later connected to the Watchmen universe, had stolen 10 years from the heroes' history, making them harsher and more ruthless. In my opinion, DC Rebirth is the best starting point for you. It was as modern as the New 52, but at the same time, it respected the roots and legacy of the characters. You read new stories with characters that feel classic.
Many critics believe that the highest quality DC stories in recent years belong to this rebirth era. Comics like Tom King's Batman and Greg Rucka's Wonder Woman are masterpieces. In this age, the concept of legacy and succession became important again. Family teams, like the Bat family or the Flash family, regained cohesion, and deep relationships between heroes, for example between Superman and Batman, were strengthened. Rebirth was a successful move to unite old and new fans. DC Rebirth proved that the power of DC stories lie in the hope and emotional connections of the characters. Dawn of DC, the current future. Finally, we arrive at where the DC universe is currently, Dawn of DC. This title is essentially a marketing phase and a refocusing after the big event Dark Crisis on Infinite Earths in 2022. Dawn of DC is not a reboot, unlike New 52 or Crisis. Rather, it is a change of direction and a renewed focus on the future and heroic legacy. After years of wrestling with continuity issues, DC now wants to focus on exciting new stories. All heroes are now in their best status and can freely create new stories. Superman is once again a public and reliable hero, and Batman faces a slightly more stable Gotham. One of the biggest features of Dawn of DC is the emphasis on legacy heroes and the younger generation. Characters like Nightwing, the Robins, and new heroes have gained a more central position, and the legacy of Batman and Superman is in the hands of the next generation. Dawn of DC is a great starting point for you as a beginner because it is the current status quo of the DC universe. If you go to a store today and pick up a comic with the Dawn of DC logo, you can be sure you are following the newest stories and events. The tone of these stories is a combination of the hope and optimism of rebirth and the complexity of modern storytelling. In short, Dawn of DC is a promise to readers. DC stories continue, and they are going to be more exciting than ever.
Well, friends, we have reviewed all the terms, eras, and storylines. But now the final question. What is the best and simplest method to start reading DC Comics right now? If you want to get acquainted with the DC Universe without being overwhelmed, follow the path below. To get to know the core DC heroes first and foremost, you should read these single-volume comics. Superman, Birthright. This story is the best and most humane modern narrative of Superman's origin. It shows Clark's childhood up to his first flight beautifully and with great hope. It is completely independent and not tied to any other major timeline. Batman, Year 1. This story is not the harsh Dark Knight Returns, but the detective origins of Batman and Jim Gordon. It shows how Batman was born and how he changed Gotham from the ground up. It is an excellent detective study, self-contained, and absolutely essential. Wonder Woman, Gods and Mortals. This is the first story arc by George Perez, published in 1987. This comic practically rewrote Wonder Woman's mythology and origins. This story delves deeply into Diana's mythological roots and is the most independent narrative of her birth. By reading these 3 titles, you will become fully acquainted with the motivation, origins, and core tone of these 3 great heroes, without being forced to enter any complex continuity. After this stage, you can comfortably enter eras like New 52 or Rebirth. Now that you like the characters, you can start reading comics from the different DC eras, but each of these has a specific reading order. If you'd like, I can make another video and fully explain the reading order for each of these eras. So, if you want me to make that video, be sure to let me know in the comments. Alright friends, that's it for this video. Be sure to write your opinions in the comments section. Subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss the next guides. Until another video, goodbye.